Okay, so I am Sister Leo Marie Luecke. I'm a Joliet Franciscan sister. I entered the convent here in 1957
Wow, eso es buen tiempo.
in Joliet at our mother house on Plainfield Avenue, which is now the University of St. Francis. And then I took my first vows in 1960. So this year we're celebrating my 60th anniversary of profession. In 1961, I began teaching in grade schools, Catholic grade schools. My first job was in Elgin, Illinois. Then I was sent to Ashland, Ohio for 2 years. I spent 5 years in St. Mary's in Plainfield with second grade, which was my favorite. And then I went 1 year to Wheaton, Illinois, and then since that, I have been working here with the Spanish community. Okay, I was born in Freeport, Illinois. Freeport, Illinois. I'm one of the youngest of 8 children. My oldest brother was born, he was 24 years old 1 week before I was born. So I was 3 months old for my mom and dad's 25th wedding anniversary.
¿En qué año fue que nació?
1938. Pardon?
¿Qué hacían sus papás para vivir?
Oh, my father had a shoe and clothing store, which his grandfather began. The store is still in Freeport. The Luecke name is still on the store, but we sold it when he was sick and died, and now it's a restaurant. So it's the Two Eagles restaurant in Freeport. So I like to go there and have breakfast when I go home to see the old store.
¿Y su mamá qué
And
hacía?
my mother was a homemaker. She had a large garden, flower garden and vegetable garden and fruits, and she canned, and we must have had about 50 berry bushes, raspberries, and in the summer she would be out picking the berries and selling them, and she was always busy, doing the wash. We had big tubs at the basement of washing, and so they'll go through the washing machine, they go through the wringer into one rinse tub, and then the wringer to another, and then the wringer to the basket, and then carry it up the basement stairs to hang it out on the line. She was very hardworking. Well, actually, by the time I was in second grade, my 6 brothers and sisters were married. So it was only my other brother was 4.5 years older than I. We were the last 2 at home.
¿Cómo se llamaba él?
It was Theodore. Teddy. So, but my mother paid for my piano lessons. I started piano in 3rd grade. And so one of the sisters at the school, so I was with her all the way through 8th grade learning piano. So I was kind of spoiled. My aunt lived with us also, so instead of doing much work, I'd be practicing the piano. So
¿A usted le gustó? ¿Era algo que ella quería?
I like, well, my mother also, she played piano in her day, and my father played violin. My great-grandfather started the first German band in Freeport, and then my grandfather started another band. They looked like they were Confederate uniforms with these big long instruments that they played. We have some pictures of them. My father was Leo and my mother Marie. That's why I took this name. My legal name is Janet. I was baptized Janet, but when I got my religious name, I took Leo Marie. So we lived. Our house was on one street, and the Catholic hospital was behind us. So I was born in St. Francis Hospital, and my mother went to Mass every day. There was a walk between the yards that she could walk over and go to the Mass at the hospital. Every day she went. When I was little, was the time of the Second World War. So I had my two brothers. One was in Germany, and my two brothers-in-law were also in the war. So every night we prayed the rosary, that they would come home safe. And my one brother who was in Germany, he was wounded. He got shot in the leg, and the bullet that hurt him killed another man. So he was home and convalescing with us for a while. He was an upholsterer, so I remember him in bed. He was doing like crochet or some kind of knitting, that he was always, doing something till he recuperated. And he ended up marrying a nurse that was in the nursing school right behind our house, and she was from Iowa. So he ended up in Iowa. And when my brother-in-law came back from the war, when I was 1.5, my one brother got married in Ohio. When I was 3, my sister got married, so I was in her wedding. And so when the war began, they lived in Fort Wayne, Indiana, but she came to live with us with her 2 children, Sally and Larry. They were redheads because her husband was Red Bicknell. He was part of the Black Hawk Valley Boys. He played the bass, big bass. So he went to war, but he was in entertainment, over entertaining the troops. And he was even with Mickey Rooney for a while. And so while she lived with us, the 3rd child was born in Freeport. So they're very close, they're almost like my brothers and sisters instead of my nieces and nephews. Pretty good. Yeah, I was a good student, yes. Yeah.
¿Y le gustaba la escuela?
I liked school. Especially I liked, every day we had to memorize the catechism answers, so
Era una escuela
my mom,
católica.
so my mom listened to me, and then I was very good at memorizing, so I knew all the questions and answers. And I had our sisters from my community. I had them all through 8th grade, from 1st to 8th grade. Then in high school, I ended up with Dominican sisters. So
¿Cómo fue su tiempo ahí?
it was nice. We had a good times, going to the basketball games, the football games.
Quería
Oh
ser,
yeah. Well, I wanted to be a teacher.
Siempre quiso ser una maestra.
Yeah. So I was able to get a working scholarship to St. Mary's College at Notre Dame, Indiana. So I went there for 2 years. We were called the staff students. We served the tables. In those days, the students, all the girls, had to sit at a table with a sister at the head of the table. And so we were the ones who brought out the food and served them and cleared the tables and cleaned up again. So we worked almost 40 hours a week. So we could only take like a part-time schedule of school. But it was good because it paid the whole tuition, which was a lot.
¿Usted los recuerda bien?
Oh yeah, my 1st grade teacher was Sister Alfred. She was so kind. As we had a little boy in our class named Alfred. And he would come late to school, and he was kind of dirty. He was from a poorer family. And this one time he came late, but he must have picked some flowers along the way. He gave them to Sister. And she was so kind to him, So that always affected me, how kind she was to this boy, Well, when I went to college, I was thinking of being a music teacher, so I studied music. Piano was my major. I majored in piano and music education, so that's what I decided to do.
Para enseñar. Que usted comenzó.
Well, in my sophomore year, my father died of cancer. So I was 18 when he died. And that affected me very much, So the following September, I entered the convent after he died, so I was 19 when I came. And my 2 roommates they were going to the convent. They decided they were going to the Daughters of Charity in St. Louis, Missouri. But I ended up coming with our sisters that I had all through grade school, the Franciscans. So then that's how I ended up here. Well, it was kind of difficult, because in those days we could not go home for 5 years to visit our family. And they could come for a few hours, maybe 4 times a year that we got to see them, So it was very difficult at the time. It was not like today is much freer, In those days, if you got a letter, it was read before you got to read it, So kind of old school, We had the whole habit with a big veil this way, And okay, well, there's still we are still 11 sisters left from my class. There were like almost 30 when we entered. And I think 23 took vows and 21 took final vows, but we're still 11 left. So.
¿Y tienen comunicación?
Oh yes, yeah. Some of my best friends, a couple of them live here in the village. 2 of my classmates live in the village, and 2 of them are in the nursing home here, and most of them are in this area, so we get together every so often. Well, then I was sent out to teach in grade schools, and I.
¿En dónde?
Well, at first I was in St. Joseph's in Elgin, Illinois, 3rd grade. I had 3rd grade, and then I had to play the Mass every morning and take the girls' choir. And then I went to Ashland, Ohio, and I had first year I had 4th and 5th grades. The second year I had 2nd and 3rd grades. But there I had to play the Mass every day too, and on weekends, and taught music in the school too. So and then I went to Plainfield, St. Mary's in Plainfield. We lived in town. There's a bank on that corner now, but there was an old house where we lived. And we just walked down Route 59 1 block and turned left to go to that little church that's now closed. For a while it was the restaurant, the sanctuary. So that's where every morning we walk over to church. In those days, Plainfield was the population of 2,200. So it was a very, very small, So there was no traffic when you crossed 59 and 30. We just, walked.
Y todos se conocían.
Yeah. The one year we had such a big storm that I was like up to my knees in snow. So finally I don't think I made it to church that day.
Se quedó en casa.
But I had 2nd grade there, and I still have a lot of the students, remember me. One of my students is a priest, Father Dean Stasel. He had his 25th anniversary the other day of his priesthood, so he invited me. It was so nice,
¿Y luego de Elgin?
Pardon?
De Elgin, ¿a dónde más fue?
Oh, de Elgin. Oh, all right. After Plainfield, I went 1 year to Wheaton, Illinois. But then I got out of school. It was I didn't have much discipline in the classroom. So I ended up coming back here to the mother house, and I was teaching at the Illinois Youth Commission out on McDonough Street, the boys that had problems, and I was teaching them to play the tonette or some little instrument that they could play. So I did that for a year. Then I ended up with the job of teaching English at the Spanish Center.
¿Cómo llegó ahí?
Through Joliet Central High School. Yeah, through the high school. Mickey Beach was the head of the adult education at the time and high school diplomas, so he hired me, and he was a very good
Pero usted
boss.
no hablaba español, ¿o sí?
Poquito. I had, during my, we had 5 years before we took final vows between 1960 and 65. So during those four summers, I took Spanish. Because when I was in Elgin, I had a little Mexican girl and a little Puerto Rican girl, and I couldn't, talk with their parents, so I decided. And when I was in Elgin, was when I first fell in love with the Mexican culture, because they already had a Spanish mass there every week, and the Camacho family were like the head of the Hispanic groups, So it was for Mexican Independence Day. They invited us over to the gym, and first time I had tacos, and they did the Mexican dances. So that's when I first fell in love with the Mexican culture. I think the music and the people. And it was the old house on Herkimer Street, 1971. And, yeah.
Alumnos.
Well, our class was up. We went in the house, and then there was like an attic. You went up these steps, and here was a classroom up there. So, well, some of my students are still around. I had Mr. Rosas was one of my students in those days, and quite a few.
Saul Garcia.
Oh yeah, probably. Oh, when I was in the high school, because from 72 to 74, I was the first one to do bilingual classes at the high school. Before that, if they came to this country, no matter what age, they sent them to the junior high if they couldn't speak English. So I talked with Mickey Beach, and he hired me for 5 mornings a week to teach the high school students who didn't speak English.
¿Cómo era la comunidad?
So I had Alma Corral, Alma Martinez was in that class, she and her brother, and I had so many. Later on I had Porfirio and Ramiro Guzman, Felipe Francini and his brother. They gave me a lot of problems. Always playing tricks. So I had, and Johnny Gutierrez was in my class. It was a lot of, Well, we were in the little chapel, at Mount Carmel on Irving Street. That's Dubai.
¿Y qué recuerda usted?
But they just started the Spanish masses at that time. The capilla was there, but it was always in English. So when Father Jaime Gainey was here, and Father Larry somebody, he ended up leaving the priesthood, but Father Jim Gainey and then Father Lopez came, and that's when the Spanish masses really took off, and the bilingual education. And
¿Todavía vive?
muy alegre, sí,
¿Cómo lo
He
recuerda
lives
usted?
muy alegre, always out doing new things, One time I was, at one time I was playing Mass in Romeoville on a Sunday, so I would leave, it was like a noon Mass or something. So this one time I went with 3 of the Mexican men who were going to drive me to the Mass, and on the way the police stopped us. And they were asking them for their papers, and I said, you don't have any right to ask them. And they said, oh, who are you, And then, so I mentioned that I was at Mount Carmel. Well, I didn't make it to Mass that day because it turned out the man was using somebody else's car, but he had permission, so it got to be very complicated, So I went back and I called Father Lopez. He said, yeah, he said, the police already called me to see if I knew you. He was always for sticking up for rights, And we were striking in front of the Jewel for the lettuce for Cesar Chavez. So we were, boycotting Jewel for the lettuce at the time. And one time, we were they already were using, we were using St. Mary's School, which is now the Spanish Center. And he had the Archbishop came from San Antonio, Texas, Bishop Flores, came one Sunday. So we had Mass in the gym at the old school because we didn't fit in the chapel. And then from there we went out to Stateville, and he had a Mass and confirmations, and then we went to the migrant camp on Rusin Ellis Farm on about 126. And at one time, Mr. Rusinellis threatened us with the gun not to come back, but we kept going anyway. But we didn't go for a while. But then after the bishop came, then we started going back again, and we would have mass in the barn while they were while they were bunching the onions. So we had a lot of, a lot of activity going on. Oh my, oh yeah, ella.
Les metían muchos problemas.
Sí, también. Tan activa ella, nunca se paró. She was always go, go, go. In the first years, I couldn't speak much Spanish, but we got along very well, because then I started a choir with the Ladies of Guadalupe. And when we first started English class, it was in the evening. So after, from 72 to 74, when I had the high school students, then they started a full bilingual program, and Jessie Gutierrez and Sister Mary Loftus took over. They were the teachers, so I was out. But then I still had English classes in the high school, so I said to Mickey Beach, we need classes in the day for the ladies, So the Ladies of Guadalupe were my first English students when we started the classes in 74.
Well, this was 1974.
1974,
Wow.
yeah. This little Felicita Cisneros, she said she learned to sign her name from when she was in my English class. Well, then I was also teaching religious ed, catechism classes, So at that time we were in the old St. Mary's School, which is now the Spanish Center, and we had classes on every floor. There were like 4 classrooms on the second floor, 4 classrooms on the third floor. So that was like 8 classrooms, and then we had an attic. They had a couple more classes up there, and we had some classes. So we must have had about 14 classes going on of religious ed on Wednesday nights. So I had a little machine, that showed film strips. So I carry that from floor to floor, and we would get them all out in the main part and show the film strip, and then talk about it on every floor. Okay. Well, the ladies were like, kept barefoot in the kitchen, and in the house. So the husbands were not too happy that Father Lopez was encouraging them to get educated, So he had some problems with some of the husbands, So he encouraged them to go to school, to learn English, well, there were a lot of gangs at the time. There were a lot of shootings. We had several young people get killed. I was at Mount Carmel one night, and this little boy was killed right over on Liberty Street, right behind us. Yeah, it was pretty bad. Yeah, one time we had a march down Collins Street for, because of the shootings. Well, now there's so many people, that a lot of people I don't even know anymore. There's so many, but yeah. But then there's a lot that still remember me, because I went to a funeral the other day, and she said, "Oh, you played for my wedding." I played for so many weddings, and then weddings of their children, and quinceañeras, and then after I think 2000, the classes changed from the high school to junior college, took over all adult ed. So then we were under junior college. So, and then I was at the Spanish Center until last year, but then I was teaching nights, and coming down the steps, I come down backwards, and I missed the last step, and I broke my femur. So I haven't been back since. Well, I was back once since, but yeah, there's so much prejudice today, discrimination. Oh my gosh. So, like so many people, they think, oh, well, they came illegally, so they need to go back, They don't realize that the Hispanics, if everybody got sent back, the economy would go way down. Because the Hispanics are here, they're working, they're contributing, they pay taxes, they, they're not citizens. They would be if they could be, But most of the people are just good people trying to do their best, And some people, they just, they're illegal, so they don't realize if you break up the family, you take the husband away, what are you doing? You're making the family poor. What can you do, It's one of our sisters goes to Kankakee, in the jail there. It's a deportation center, and the stories are very sad, of what they picked them up for, and some of them, was for just a very little. It's really not a crime, but they're just because they came, without papers. Out of my brothers and sisters, I have 40 nieces and nephews. I have over 75 great nieces and nephews, and over 75 great nieces and nephews. I have some greats, so I can't keep track of them all. I think we're in 25 states.
Wow.
So all over the country, Yeah. I'm still teaching. I still teach one class at junior college, Monday and Wednesday morning. Yeah. Well, I just keep going as long as I can, Well, pretty good, except I just had hip surgery in December, so then I was over at Our Lady of Angels for 1 month. Then I came here and got some home therapy. So I didn't go back to school until February. Okay, it says, Advocate of the Year Award, presented to Sister Leo Marie Luecke, but my name is spelled wrong. The U comes before the E. Latino Business Association, 7th Annual Awards Banquet in 2004. Okay. This says, walk the talk. Take the initiative and lead the way. You can make the difference with the penguins. Sister Leo Marie Luecke, in sincere appreciation of your contributions, 2014 Spanish Community Center. Oh, there's another story about Veronica from the Spanish Center. When she was little, her mom was in my English class at the Spanish Center, her mother and her aunt. And the mother asked if she could bring the twins, and I said, well, if they behave. But Veronica wasn't behaving, so I had to send her home. So she always tells that story. They just lived across the street from the Spanish Center, so I used to help out her grandma quite a bit when they were. Nellis gave that to me for my first communion, 1945. This little guy I got in Peru. I spent almost a year in Brazil visiting our sisters, and on the way home I took a trip to Peru. So I bought this little, supposed to, you can blow it, let's see.
Háblenos de su tiempo en Perú. No nos habló de eso.
Oh, all right. I stayed with the Carmelite Fathers in Lima.
¿Qué año era?
1989. And a good friend of mine, a Brazilian lady, went with me. And then we took a trip to Cusco. And when we got there, they said you should lay down first, because of the altitude. So we went to bed, and it was very cold. You had to pile up with blankets. And then I thought, what am I doing in bed? I want to go out. So I went out on the streets and started looking around. And it was the time before Corpus Christi. So I was walking down the street, and here came a procession carrying every day they had processions from the different churches carrying their patron saint, you know. And then the people were spread out on the streets selling food, and one of their main dishes is guinea pig.
Oh.
But I didn't try it. I didn't try it. So then on one of the weekends, we took a trip to Machu Picchu. Oh, that was beautiful, you know. The train in Cusco goes back and forth like this up the mountain. And then we took the train to Machu Picchu. And in that time, there were hardly any people around, you know. It was really, now today I think it's quite a tourist attraction, but in those days, what was that terrorist group was going in Lima, so it was kind of, you know, tricky to be traveling there. So and there was a mariachi group playing there in Machu Picchu. And then another day we took a trip of, you know, just around the different ruins. It's just amazing, you know, some of the rock formations they have that you don't know how people moved those big rocks, you know. So that was very interesting, you know, to be in Peru. I love to hear the music. You'd hear that music in the mornings, you know.
Nice. ¿Qué nos va a tocar ahora?
Okay. You want to hear De Colores?
¿De colores? Yes.
Okay. Should I sing? De colores se visten los campos en la primavera. De colores son los pajarillos que vienen de afuera. De colores es el arco iris, vemos lucir. Y por eso los grandes amores, muchos colores me gustan a mí. Y por eso los grandes amores, muchos colores me gustan a mí.
Bravo.
This is my baptism day. My mom and dad, my oldest sister, she was like a second mother to me, and my brother Ted. We were the two youngest. And this is my first communion with my mom and dad.
¿Puede voltear un poquito más la foto para la cámara? ¿Qué año fue el bautismo?
1938. 1938, April 3rd. April 3rd, 1938. And then this is a picture with two of my brothers and my sister when I was the baby. He's the one that got married first in Ohio when I was a year and a half. So my oldest nephew just turned 78, I think, or 79, I don't know. This was taken at my one niece's, her 50th birthday at the time. So that's quite a few years ago because she was a teenager, now she's a mother. But this gal photoshopped this. So I'm not really standing on top of them. But people always say, were you really standing there? I said, no, it's... But first she did one layer and second layer and just, you know, one at a time, and then she put them together. So, but this is quite everybody that sees it, you know, enjoys this picture. This was in one of my many trips to Mexico. I was visiting a family in Guadalajara, and we went to Chapala. So this is where I got this painting of Our Lady of Guadalupe in Chapala. It was a beautiful, beautiful place. And one year I went to Mexico. I played for Porfirio Guzman's wedding in Villa Juarez, San Luis Potosí. It was on January 7th. And I think maybe they are married 40 years now, I think. Well, I hope that we would have pray for peace in our world, pray for the solution to the immigration problems. They're all over the world. And pray for our dreamers that one day they will be able to be fully citizens of the United States, because they deserve it, you know. So just try to overcome prejudice and discrimination, and just love one, like Jesus said, love one another. So.